Hey dudes, it's me, Duskwer, and today I'm going to be talking about money, and more specifically, the saying, money can't buy happiness. It's a pretty common saying, relatively speaking, but today I'm wondering if there's actually any sort of truth to that. And so my first thought about it is that there must be a lot of nuance, considering every person is different and has lived a different life, and is in a different situation. So there definitely is a different answer for everyone, I'd say. Things like their starting point, as in like where they were born and their family, how much money they had, things like that. Relationships, as in the people they're around and what they're like. Need for connection, as in, do these people really need other people's validation and love and support and whatnot, or will they just be happy with other things? And so, starting with the starting point, how does being born in a certain place with certain people affect how someone might value money and find happiness in it? So, of course, someone rich, I think it would be pretty obvious that they wouldn't value money as much as someone who was born in poverty or another tough situation, on average. So, someone who would grow up poor and then eventually become rich or well off or have enough money to live well, they would definitely appreciate the value of money, considering they know what it's like to not have many resources or money. So of course there's that main difference, considering whether or not it will make someone happy. And to add on to that, in school I learned about Buddhism, and apparently the Buddha was like a prince, and his dad gave him pretty much anything and everything he could ever want. So he locked his son in a palace and gave him a lot of luxuries, a lot of women, a lot of money, and a lot of other things to keep him happy. And yet it didn't seem to make him happy. He needed some other kind of fulfillment, is what I heard from the story. So, of course, that is another point, that money wouldn't buy happiness. But then we also consider that he was born into those riches, so he wouldn't seem to know how to value that properly. And speaking of fulfillment, relationships often do bring fulfillment into people's lives, but that can definitely change when money is introduced into the equation. Especially speaking on the topic of lottery winners and other people who quickly get rich in a short amount of time. When you suddenly get a lot of money, the people around you, it definitely changes them in some ways, in terms of certain people. Of course, often they'll get greedy and want some too, and then maybe even try to manipulate you into giving them money. So then that's definitely something to consider. And that might even happen if you don't have that much money, or are even not that rich, or have been rich for a while. It can always happen, as long as you have some amount of money. I mean, I've heard of people who don't have that much money still getting used for the little amount of finances that they do have. Another important thing to mention would be the amount of money that we're talking about, because different ranges of money could affect different people in terms of their happiness. Like, someone who's rich would take a lot more money to make happy than someone who's poorer. Like, a simpler example would be, if a kid gets $50, then they could get a lot of toys and a lot of candy. Maybe not a lot of toys in this economy, but quite a few. And as an adult, getting $50 wouldn't be that much usually. because adults have jobs, and in a couple of hours they could probably make that same amount of money. So $50 definitely isn't as much relatively for the adult as compared to the child, who has less experience with money. And relating back to the topic of fulfillment, there's a pretty big difference between just a feeling of pleasure and one of actual true peace. So I think it's important to make a divide between those two and clarify what we're talking about. Because pleasure, money definitely could buy pleasure, as in cars or big houses or boats and other luxuries, or even like actual pleasure like drugs. And I'll get back to that topic after peace. And peace would be more like a general feeling of actual fulfillment and connection and other things like that. So there definitely is a difference, and oftentimes money can't really buy that in a true sense. Like, peace is usually found with purpose and meaning in your life and having relationships and whatnot, things like that. Not really with money. Money can be part of it, but it really isn't usually the main factor of it. And now back to drugs. There definitely is a feeling of pleasure that comes with certain drugs that can be associated with happiness. So if you think of happiness as like a sense of pleasure, a good feeling, I guess technically money can buy happiness under that definition. If you use enough drugs, then you definitely could, but it's definitely not recommended long term, as usually these drugs are very unhealthy to take in large doses for a long time. Or even other things, certain drugs would be bad even when used less. And another thing, we have to think about the value of money inherently. As in, how would this change if money was worth less or more, or if it wasn't even worth anything at all? Because I guess it, not just as a society can we decide the value of money, but even at an individual level. Like, certain people value money more than others, as I've mentioned many times before. And like I mentioned a few seconds ago, if society decides to make money worthless suddenly, like if a society were to collapse, or if they were to get rid of a certain currency, then the money would have no value, and then there wouldn't really be any happiness, unless someone is happy with owning a bunch of little pieces of round metal or sheets of paper or whatever. And to add on to the point about the worth of money on an individual level, if you had someone like, say, a caveman who didn't have money back then they wouldn't really know what to do with it. It would definitely have no value to them. So, of course, I don't think a piece of paper or coin could make a caveman happy, because they wouldn't know that the money actually has any kind of value. They would just think it's a weird item. So, like I said earlier, there are things that money can buy, and there are also, to add on to that, things that money can't buy. And like I said earlier, some of the things that money can buy are big houses, nice cars, boats, planes. Then they can also buy basic necessities so you can live comfortably. And then there are also services, so like house cleaning, or maybe like an experience, or like a massage, things like that. And then there are also some more interesting things like health, because if you can have enough money, then you can afford good doctors and chefs to make you food, and supplements, vitamins. You can get exercise equipment, And then also time. Relating to health, like, you'll have more time to exercise and take care of yourself if you have money. And on top of that, speaking of time, you can just have more time to yourself to do the things that you love, which I guess is a good argument for money buying happiness, in a sense, as long as you already have that foundation of things you want to do. But then there are also things that money cannot buy. The most obvious one would be actual true relationships. Like, you could pay someone, but that's never gonna be the same as having an actual friend or someone to date, things like that. And direct fulfillment. I mean, money can buy you indirect fulfillment if you decide to maybe donate it to charity and use it to help other people. I guess that would be an example of it, but it won't fulfill you on its own just by having money in most cases. And a really important one would be trust, relating back to the first point about relationships. Even if you do manage to get them, you can never really 100% trust them, because you would never truly know if the other person is in it for who you are and actually loves you for that, or if they're just there because you have a lot of money and something to provide for them. So it would be hard to trust anyone once you have a lot of money. Okay, so to wrap things up, can money buy happiness? I guess, like I said at the beginning, it's very nuanced and it depends from person to person. But overall, I'd say it kind of can. As long as you have a good foundation already, like if you have good relationships with people you can trust, and if you have some kind of purpose, something that fulfills you and that you can work towards, I'd say with money it would be a great amplifier that would definitely make you a lot happier. But if you don't have those things, I think it's a lot harder to answer that question, because it would depend even more on the individual. So pretty much, with a good foundation, I'd say yeah, money could buy happiness. Also, sorry if the editing on my voice is weird. I do the talking parts in segments of like a minute so that I stutter less and mess up fewer times, because I do this unscripted, so it just makes it easier for me. And again, sorry if my voice sounds kind of weird in the editing. That's pretty much it. Have a good day and have a good night. Okay, bye.